I stared at the eviction notice for the third time today, hoping maybe the words would change if I looked hard enough. 30 days. That's all I had left before they threw my stuff on the sidewalk. The apartment looked like a crime scene already. Empty pizza boxes piled next to the couch because I couldn't afford real groceries. Bills spread across the coffee table like some twisted confetti. And in the corner, that stack of rejection letters I'd stopped counting after 50. My phone buzzed. Alyssa. "Hey, how are you holding up?" My sister's voice had that careful tone she'd been using since I got out of the hospital, like I might break if she spoke too loud. "Living the dream." I kicked at an empty ramen cup. "Just got my eviction notice." "Betty, I'm so sorry. Listen, I found something that might help. There's a job posting for night security at Millbrook Shopping Center. $30 an hour, and they're hiring immediately." 30 an hour? That was more than I'd made at any of my office jobs. "What's the catch?" "I don't know. The posting is pretty vague. Just says they need someone right away for overnight shifts." She paused. "I know it sounds weird, but weird doesn't matter right now." I was already grabbing a pen to write down the number. Weird pays rent. 20 minutes later, I was calling the number with trembling hands. A man picked up on the second ring. "Jonathan Bradley speaking." "Hi, I'm calling about the security position at Millbrook Shopping Center." "Excellent, excellent." His voice had this nervous energy, like he'd been drinking too much coffee. "When can you start?" That was it? No questions about experience or background checks? "Well, I'd need to interview first." Of course, of course. "Can you come in this afternoon? Say 3 o'clock? I glanced around my trashed apartment. "Sure. Wonderful. Just come to the main entrance. I'll meet you there." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Either this guy was desperate or this was some kind of scam. But $30 an hour meant I could catch up on rent in a couple weeks. I couldn't afford to be picky. Millbrook Shopping Center sat on the edge of town like a forgotten relic. I'd driven past it countless times, but never really paid attention. Up close, it looked worn down. Half the parking lot was empty, and several storefronts had "for lease" signs taped to their windows. The main entrance doors were propped open, but the inside looked dim. Most of the stores had their security gates pulled down. My footsteps sounded way too loud as I walked toward the information desk. "Ms. Aguilar?" I turned to see a thin man in a wrinkled brown suit hurrying toward me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Jonathan Bradley." He stuck out his hand. His palm was damp. "Thank you so much for coming. Shall we sit?" He walked me over to a bench by the fountain in the center court. The water had stopped flowing. "So," he pulled out a clipboard, but didn't look at it. "Have you done security work before?" "Not exactly, but I have a psychology degree, and I'm good in crisis situations." I didn't mention that my most recent crisis situation had involved a bottle of pills and a very patient ER doctor. "Psychology. Interesting." He scribbled something down. "The position is overnight security, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. You'd be working alone most of the time." "That's fine." Alone sounded perfect, actually. No coworkers asking questions about the gap in my resume. "The pay is $30 an hour, paid weekly." He was talking faster now, like he wanted to get through this as quickly as possible. "There are some specific protocols you'll need to follow. Company policy. The day manager will go over everything with you." I waited for him to ask about references or run a background check. Instead, he reached into a bag beside the bench and pulled out a navy blue uniform shirt and black pants. "Congratulations. You're hired." "Just like that? We need someone immediately." He handed me the uniform. "Can you start tomorrow night?" This was insane. Nobody hired people this fast unless something was seriously wrong. But the uniform felt real enough, and $30 an hour was $30 an hour. Yes. Excellent. He stood up, already looking toward the exit. Report to the main entrance at 10 p.m. sharp. Ask for Rick Dalton, the day manager. He'll show you everything you need to know. Jonathan was halfway to the parking lot before I could ask any follow-up questions. I sat there clutching my new uniform, scanning the empty mall. A few stores were still open, but the whole place felt hollow, like a movie set after everyone had gone home. I should have been relieved. For the first time in months, I had a job. But something about Jonathan's jittery behavior and the hurried interview made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed with a text from Alyssa. "How did it go?" "Got the job," I typed back. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." I stared at the uniform in my lap. The security badge was already sewn on, like they'd been expecting me specifically, or like they went through guards so fast they kept extras ready. I walked back to my car, trying to shake off the strange feeling. So what if the interview was odd? I needed this job. In 2 weeks, I could have enough money to stop the eviction. In a month, I could start putting my life back together. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of the mall in my rearview mirror. For just a second, it looked like someone was standing in one of the dark storefronts watching me leave. But when I looked back, it was gone. I pulled into the empty parking lot at 9:45 p.m., my headlights cutting through the darkness toward Millbrook Shopping Center. The place looked even more depressing at night. Half the exterior lights were burned out, and the few cars scattered around probably belonged to the cleaning crew. The main entrance was propped open with a rubber doorstop. I walked through, my footsteps bouncing off the tile floors. Most of the stores had their security gates pulled down, creating dark patches that stretched across the corridors. The whole place felt like a tomb. "You must be Betty." I spun around to find a stocky guy in his late 30s walking toward me. He had reddish-brown hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd been doing this job way too long. "Rick Dalton." He stuck out his hand. "Day manager. Thanks for meeting me." I shook his hand, noticing how he kept glancing toward the exit like he couldn't wait to leave. "Let's make this quick." Rick started walking without waiting for me to follow. "I've got somewhere to be." He took me through the main hallway, showing me the important spots as we walked. "Security office is back here behind the food court. That's your home base. Radio, monitors, coffee machine that works half the time." The security office was a small room with a desk, a bunch of black and white screens showing different areas of the mall, and a chair that had definitely seen better days. Rick picked up a plastic-covered sheet from the desk and passed it to me. "Company rules. Read them. Memorize them. Follow them exactly." I looked down at the list. The first few items seemed normal enough. Patrol every hour, check all doors, report any suspicious activity. But then things got weird. "Greet Clyde in the department store window during each patrol." I read aloud. "Who's Clyde?" "Mannequin in the men's clothing display. Just say hello and keep moving." "You want me to talk to a mannequin?" Rick was already heading toward the door. "Company policy. Liability thing." I kept reading. "Avoid the staff-only door near the food court storage area. Do not open under any circumstances." I looked up. "What's in there?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Rick checked his watch again. "Just stay away from it." The next rule made me blink twice. "Ignore any sounds, movements, or voices that seem weird or out of place. Old building. Pipes make noise, security gates rattle. Don't let it spook you." "And this one?" I pointed to the bottom of the list. Never interact with anyone wearing a top hat? Rick stopped walking. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked directly at me. That one's important. You see someone in a top hat, you go the other direction, fast. Why would someone be wearing a top hat in a mall? Just follow the rules, Betty. He started moving again, leading me back toward the main corridor. They're there for a reason. I jogged to catch up. What happened to the last security guard? Rick's shoulders went stiff. Didn't work out. What does that mean? Means he didn't follow the rules. Rick stopped at the information desk and grabbed a radio from the charger. This is yours, Channel 3. Only call me for real emergencies. Define real emergency. Fire, break-in, medical situation. Not weird noises or moving shadows or any of that garbage. He handed me the radio. The building's old. Your imagination will try to fill in the blanks. Don't let it. We walked back toward the entrance, Rick moving quicker with each step. He showed me the alarm panel, rattled off a few codes I was supposed to remember, and pointed out the emergency exits. Patrol every hour on the hour. Check all the doors. Make sure nothing's broken into. Most nights are quiet. He paused at the main entrance. Just stick to the rules and you'll be fine. Rick, wait. I held up the laminated sheet. These rules are insane. Talking to mannequins? Avoiding people in top hats? What kind of place is this? He turned back, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Not annoyance or impatience. Fear. The kind of place that pays $30 an hour for overnight security. Rick pushed through the door. Follow the rules, Betty. All of them. Exactly. The door swung shut behind him, leaving me alone in the huge, dimly lit mall. I heard his car start up in the parking lot, then the sound of tires on pavement as he drove away like something was chasing him. I looked down at the rules again. The whole thing felt like some big prank. Maybe this was how they messed with new employees, seeing how long someone would put up with crazy instructions before quitting. But $30 an hour was $30 an hour. I walked back to the security office and dropped into the creaky chair. The monitors showed empty hallways, dark storefronts, and the occasional flash of fluorescent lights. Everything looked normal. Boring even. I checked my watch. 10:15 p.m. 7 hours and 45 minutes to go. Standing up, I grabbed my flashlight and headed out for my first patrol. The rules said to start with the department store, which meant finding this Clyde character and having what would probably be the most ridiculous conversation of my life. The air system droned overhead as I walked through the empty hallways. My footsteps bounced off the walls, making the place feel even more hollow than it had during the day. A few security lights created patches of brightness between the storefronts, but most of the mall was dark. I found the department store and walked toward the men's clothing section. There, positioned in the front window display, stood a male mannequin in an expensive-looking charcoal suit. The nameplate at the base read Clyde. I felt like an idiot, but I needed this job. "Hi, Clyde," I muttered, then kept walking. One rule down, several more to go. This was going to be a long night. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out for my first real patrol, the rule sheet folded in my back pocket. The mall felt different now that I was alone. Bigger somehow, with too many dark corners and empty spaces that went on and on. The department store stood ahead, its entrance wide open like a gaping mouth. I walked through the aisles of discounted clothing and clearance items, my footsteps quiet on the thin carpet. The men's section sat in the back corner, and there he was. Clyde stood in the window display, perfectly positioned in his charcoal gray suit. The mannequin was tall, maybe 6 feet, with that fake handsomeness that display figures always had. His glass eyes caught the security lighting in a way that made them look almost alive. I felt like a complete idiot. "Hi, Clyde," I muttered, then kept walking before anyone could witness me talking to a piece of plastic. The rest of the patrol went smoothly. I checked doors, tested locks, made sure all the security gates were properly locked down. Most of the stores were dark, their windows blocked by metal barriers. The whole place felt deserted, which I guess it basically was after 10 p.m. I made it back to the security office and dropped into the creaky chair. The monitors displayed empty hallways and darkened shops. Nothing moving, nothing unusual. Maybe this job would be dull instead of strange. I could handle dull. An hour later, I grabbed my flashlight again and headed out for round 2. The rules said every hour on the hour, so every hour on the hour it was. I was walking past the food court when I heard something that made me stop. A soft, rustling sound, like fabric moving. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the beam across the tables and chairs. "Hello?" My voice echoed off the tile walls. The beam caught something near the fountain. Blankets. Old ones. Bundled up like someone had been sleeping there. As I got closer, the bundle moved. "Don't call it in." An elderly man sat up from the blankets, blinking in my flashlight beam. He had long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and a weathered face that suggested he'd been living rough for a while. "Sir, you can't be here." I kept my voice gentle. The rules said to report unauthorized persons, but this guy looked harmless. Tired and cold, but harmless. "Name's Patrick." He stood up slowly, favoring his left leg. "I know I'm not supposed to be here, but it's cold tonight, and the security usually doesn't mind if I stay quiet." I glanced around the deserted food court. The man was probably in his 60s, clearly homeless, and it was November. Calling the cops would just get him arrested for trespassing. "How long have you been coming here?" "Few months now. Since they hired the last security guard." Patrick gathered his blankets around his shoulders. "Nice kid. Didn't hassle me about sleeping here." "What happened to him?" Patrick's expression changed. Something guarded crept into his eyes. "Didn't work out." That was the same thing Rick had said. I was getting sick of hearing that phrase. "Look, I'm not going to call anyone, but you need to stay out of sight if other people come through." Patrick nodded. "Appreciated. You seem like good people." I walked back toward the security office, but something made me turn around. "Patrick, you want some coffee? The machine in the office actually works." His face brightened. "That'd be real nice." I brought him a cup of coffee that was only kind of awful and sat down at one of the food court tables. Patrick wrapped his hands around the cup like it was something valuable. "You read those rules they gave you?" he asked. "Yeah, they're insane." "Maybe, but you should follow them anyway." Patrick took a sip of coffee. "This place gets strange at night." "Strange how?" He stayed quiet for a while, looking down at his cup. "Things get moved around. Weird noises. People showing up who don't belong here. People like you. People like me are the least of your worries." Patrick looked up at me. "That mannequin you're supposed to talk to? Sometimes he's not where you left him." A cold feeling crept up my back. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. You greet him in the window, come back an hour later, and he's facing a different direction. Or standing somewhere else entirely." I thought about Clyde in his perfect suit, those glass eyes that looked way too aware. Mannequins get moved around. Day staff probably repositions the displays. At 2 in the morning? I didn't have an answer for that. Follow the rules. Patrick said again. All of them. Even the ones that sound crazy. I left him with his coffee and headed out for my next patrol. The mall felt different now. Like Patrick's words had changed something in the air. I found myself looking over my shoulder more, jumping at shadows that were probably just security lights flickering. The department store was my last stop. I walked through the aisles toward the men's section, my flashlight beam dancing across clothing racks and sale signs. Clyde stood in his window display exactly where I'd left him. "Hi, Clyde," I said, feeling slightly less ridiculous this time. I was turning to leave when I heard something that made my blood freeze. A child's voice, singing softly. I spun around, sweeping my flashlight across the store. Nothing. Just empty aisles and dark corners. The singing continued, coming from somewhere near the front of the store. I followed the sound, my pulse racing. It led me back toward the mall's main corridor, past the department store entrance, toward the food court. A little girl sat at one of the tables, maybe 8 years old, with straight black hair and a white dress. She had a box of crayons spread out in front of her and was drawing on a piece of paper, making that same soft melody. I walked over slowly, keeping my flashlight pointed down at the floor so I wouldn't startle her. "Hey there. Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up at me and smiled. Her eyes were strangely bright, almost glowing in the low light. "I'm drawing," she said simply. "I can see that. What are you drawing?" She held up the paper. It was a rough crayon drawing of a house with a big tree in the front yard. The kind of picture any kid might draw, except something about it made my stomach turn. "That's very nice. But you shouldn't be here by yourself. It's not safe." The girl tilted her head, still smiling. "It's safe for me." I blinked and she was gone. Not walked away, not ran off. Gone. The chair was empty. The crayons scattered across the table, the drawing lying where she'd left it. I spun in a circle, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Hello? Where did you go?" Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no sign that anyone had been there at all, except for the drawing on the table. I grabbed the paper with trembling hands. The house looked familiar somehow, though I couldn't place where I might have seen it. The tree was drawn in dark green crayon, its branches stretching toward the edges of the paper, like they were trying to escape. I searched the entire food court area, checking behind every table and chair, looking for any way a child could have disappeared so quickly. There wasn't one. The nearest exit was 50 feet away, and I would have heard footsteps on the tile floor. Patrick was gone too. His blankets were still there, but he'd vanished just as completely as the little girl. I walked back to the security office on shaky legs, the drawing gripped in my hand. The monitors showed empty hallways and dark storefronts. No sign of a child or an elderly homeless man anywhere in the building. I sat down in the creaky chair and stared at the drawing. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the stress of everything. The eviction, the hospital stay, the desperate job search was finally catching up with me. But the paper felt real. The crayon marks were fresh, waxy under my fingertips. I folded the drawing and tucked it in my pocket next to the rules. 4 hours left in my shift. 4 hours to figure out whether I was going crazy, or if this place really was as strange as Patrick had warned me. Either way, I was starting to think $30 an hour might not cut it. I stared at Clyde from across the men's section, my flashlight beam fixed on his perfectly styled plastic hair. He wasn't where I'd left him. An hour ago, he'd been positioned in the window display facing outward toward the mall corridor. Now he stood 20 feet away, turned toward the back of the store like he was watching something. My mouth went dry. Patrick's words bounced around in my head. Sometimes the mannequin wasn't where you left him. I'd brushed it off as paranoid rambling, but here was proof that something was seriously messed up with this place. I walked closer, my sneakers squeaking against the department store's thin carpet. Clyde's glass eyes seemed to follow my movement, though I knew that couldn't be right. Just the security lighting hitting them from different angles. He was standing right in front of a door I'd never seen before. Plain white paint, mostly faded, with a simple sign that said, "Authorized personnel only," in black letters. This had to be the staff-only door Rick had warned me about, the one I was supposed to stay away from no matter what. But Clyde was facing right toward it. Well, not exactly gesturing, but his whole body was turned toward the door like he wanted me to notice it. I pulled out the laminated rule sheet and found the line about avoiding the staff-only door near food court storage. This door was in the department store, not near the food court. Maybe the rules meant a different door entirely. Or maybe I was looking for excuses. I reached for the handle before I could talk myself out of it. The metal felt cold under my palm, and to my surprise, it turned easily. No lock, no resistance. If this door was so dangerous, why wasn't it secured? The smell hit me the second I cracked it open. I gagged and stumbled backward, my hand flying to cover my nose and mouth. It was the worst thing I'd ever smelled. Sweet and rotten and thick enough to taste. Like meat left in a hot car for weeks. But I'd already seen enough in that brief moment to know I had to look again. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and pushed the door wider, shining my flashlight into the storage room. Shelves lined the walls, most of them empty except for a few scattered cleaning supplies. And there, crumpled in the far corner like someone had just tossed it aside, was a body, a human body in an advanced state of decay, wearing a navy blue security uniform identical to mine. I slammed the door shut and ran. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely punch in 911 on my cell phone. I made it back to the security office and dropped into the creaky chair, trying to get my breathing under control while the phone rang. 911. What's your emergency? I found a body, a dead body at Millbrook Shopping Center. I'm the security guard and I found a body in a storage room. Are you in immediate danger? I don't think so. I'm alone in the building. The body's been there for a while. The dispatcher took my information and told me officers were on their way. I was supposed to stay on the line, but I hung up anyway. I needed to think. The previous security guard, the one who didn't work out, according to Rick, the one who wouldn't listen. This was what happened when you stepped out of line. I sat there staring at the monitors, watching empty corridors and dark storefronts while my thoughts spiraled. How long had that body been in there? Days? Weeks? And why hadn't anyone found it before now? 20 minutes later, I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot. I walked to the main entrance and found two police officers approaching, a tall black woman and a shorter blonde woman, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else at this hour. You the one who called about a body? The black officer showed me her badge. Officer Paget. This is Officer Roach. Betty Aguilar. I'm the night security guard. Officer Roach looked around the empty mall, clearly doubtful. You work here by yourself? Yeah. I was doing my patrol and found the body in a storage room. Show us, Officer Paget said. I led them through the mall toward the department store, my flashlight beam bouncing across the floor. Everything looked normal now. Boring even, just empty stores and security gates. We reached the men's section, and I stopped short. Clyde was back in the window display, facing outward exactly where he'd been during my first patrol. Like he'd never moved at all. The door's right here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Officer Roach tried the handle. It's locked. What? No, it was open before. That's how I got in. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Paget pulled out a small flashlight and checked the door frame. No signs of forced entry. You sure this is the right door? I'm positive. The smell was horrible, and there was a body in a security uniform just like mine. Officer Roach grabbed a key ring from her belt and tested several keys until one fit. The door swung open, and she pointed her flashlight inside. Empty storage room. Some cleaning supplies on the shelves. I pushed past her and checked for myself. The room was exactly like she'd said. Bare shelves, a couple bottles of floor cleaner, some old mops. No body, no smell, nothing. I don't understand. It was right there in the corner. The smell was so bad I could barely breathe. Officer Paget walked into the room and glanced around. No signs of decomposition, no unusual smells. You feeling okay, miss? I'm fine. I know what I saw. When's the last time you slept? Officer Roach asked. You work nights, right? That can mess with your head. This isn't about sleep deprivation. There was a dead body in this room an hour ago. The officers spent another 10 minutes looking through the storage room and checking around the area. They came up empty. No signs that anyone had been killed there. No hint of that awful stench. No reason for what I'd witnessed. Look, Officer Paget said as we walked back toward the main entrance. Night shifts can be tough. Stress, isolation. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. You think I'm hallucinating? I think you're working alone in a big empty building in the middle of the night. That would make anyone jumpy. Officer Roach handed me a business card. If you see anything else unusual, call us. But make sure it's real before you do. Filing false reports is a crime. They left me standing in the empty mall, their car headlights sweeping across the parking lot as they drove away. I walked back to the security office and sat down, staring at the monitors. The body had been real. The smell had been real. I wasn't losing my mind, but somehow it had all vanished now. My radio crackled to life. Betty, you there? Rick's voice. I grabbed the radio. Rick, what are you doing awake? Got a call from the police dispatch. Something about you reporting a dead body. Where are you? Parking lot. Buzz me in. I walked to the main entrance and found Rick standing outside, looking more tired than angry. He was wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, like he'd thrown on clothes and rushed over. What happened? He asked as I let him in. I told him everything. The mannequin's new position, the unlocked door, the body in the security uniform, the police finding nothing. Rick listened without interrupting, his face growing more tired with each detail. The previous security guard, I said when I finished. That was him, wasn't it? Rick rubbed his face with both hands. Yeah, probably. What do you mean, probably? Either it was or it wasn't. It was him, but he's not really dead. Rick, I saw a decomposing corpse. You saw what happens when someone breaks the rules. The door shows you things. Warnings, maybe. Or threats. Rick started walking toward the security office. The body disappears when the door closes. It always does. I followed him, my head spinning. Always. How many people have seen this? Everyone who opens that door. That's why it's off limits. Where's the actual security guard? The real person? Rick stopped walking. Missing. Been gone 3 weeks now. Missing how? He broke the rules one too many times. Started investigating things he should have left alone. One night he just didn't show up for his shift. And you kept the job posting open? You hired me to replace someone who disappeared? The company needs security coverage. The company? I grabbed his arm. What company, Rick? Who do we actually work for? He pulled away from me. People who don't like questions. We reached the security office, and Rick dropped into the visitor's chair with a tired sigh. He looked older than he had just a few hours ago, like this whole mess was wearing him down by the minute. "I should fire you," he said. "Opening that door was a direct violation of your instructions. But you won't. You need the money. And honestly, we need someone who can handle weird situations without completely falling apart." Rick looked at the monitors showing empty corridors. Most people quit after the first night. What about the mannequin? Clyde was pointing at that door. Sometimes the building tries to help. Sometimes it tries to hurt you. Learning the difference is part of staying alive. I thought about the little girl with her crayon drawings, Patrick's warnings, the teddy bear that had somehow kept me safe from the thing in the top hat. The rules aren't random, are they? They're actual protection. Now you're getting it. Rick stood up. "Follow them exactly, Betty. All of them." The previous guard thought he was smart enough to bend them. He thought he could figure out what was really going on here. What happened to him? He found out. Rick headed for the door, then stopped. "You've got 4 hours left in your shift. Stick to your patrols. Greet the mannequin. Avoid the storage door. Pretend tonight never happened." "Rick, wait. The thing in the top hat that almost got me. Will it come back?" "Not for a while. They don't like to fail. But there are other things in this building, and some of them are worse." He left me alone with the monitors and my spinning mind. I checked the clock. 3:47 a.m. 4 hours until sunrise, until I could get out of here and try to make sense of what I'd discovered. The last security guard had vanished. The corpse in the storage room was some kind of otherworldly message. The mannequin was either protecting me or setting me up for something worse. And I'd still show up tomorrow night anyway because $30 an hour was still $30 an hour. I grabbed my flashlight and went out for my next patrol, the rules clutched in my sweaty palm. This time I was going to follow every single one. I stood there watching Officer Roach sweep her flashlight beam across the empty storage room, my brain fighting to make sense of what lay before me. Or rather, what didn't. "There's nothing here," she said, turning back to me with that look cops get when they think someone's wasting their time. "Just cleaning supplies." "But the smell?" "What smell?" Officer Paget stepped into the room and took a deep breath. "Smells like industrial cleaner to me." I pushed past them both and aimed my flashlight into the corner where the body had been. Nothing. Just concrete floor and dust bunnies. I know what I saw. There was a dead person in a security uniform right there. The officers exchanged another look. Officer Roach shut her notepad with a snap. "Miss Aguilar, when's the last time you got a full night's sleep? This isn't about being tired. Night shift work can mess with your head," Officer Paget said, her tone gentler now. "Especially in a big empty building like this. Your mind starts filling in the blanks." "You think I'm hallucinating?" "I think you're under a lot of stress. New job, working alone, probably not eating right." She handed me a business card. "If you see anything else unusual, call us. But make sure it's actually there before you do." Officer Roach wasn't as diplomatic. "Filing false reports is a misdemeanor, just so you know." They left me standing in the department store, their footsteps clicking across the tile as they walked back toward the main entrance. I heard car doors slam, engines start, headlights sweep across the storefront windows. I was alone again. I looked at Clyde, back in his window display like he'd never moved. His glass eyes caught my flashlight beam, giving him that creepy look of being aware. "What the hell is going on here?" I whispered. My radio crackled. "Betty, you there?" Rick's voice made me jump. I grabbed the radio. "Rick, it's almost midnight. What are you doing up?" "Got a call from dispatch. Something about you reporting a dead body." "Where are you?" "Parking lot." "Let me in." I walked to the main entrance and found Rick standing outside in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking like he'd thrown on clothes and rushed over. His hair was sticking up on one side. "What happened?" he asked as I unlocked the door. I told him everything. The mannequin pointing at the door, that awful stench, the rotting body in the security uniform, the cops finding nothing. Rick listened without cutting me off, but his face went from irritated to just plain tired as I kept talking. "The previous security guard," I said when I finished. "That was him, wasn't it?" Rick rubbed his face with both hands. "Yeah, probably." "What do you mean, probably?" "It was him, but he's not really dead." "Rick, I saw a corpse. You saw what happens when someone breaks the rules. The door shows you things, warnings maybe, or threats." He started walking toward the security office. "The body disappears when the door closes. It always does." I followed him, feeling dizzy. Always? How many people have seen this? Everyone who opens that door. That's why it's off limits. "Where's the actual security guard? The real person?" Rick stopped walking. "Missing. Has been for 3 weeks." "Missing how?" "He broke the rules one too many times. Started investigating things he should have left alone. One night he just didn't show up for his shift." "And you kept hiring people? You brought me in to replace someone who disappeared?" "The company needs security coverage." "What company, Rick? Who do we actually work for?" He pulled away when I tried to grab his arm. "People who don't like questions." We reached the security office, and Rick dropped into the visitor's chair like all the energy had drained out of him. He looked older than he had a few hours ago. "I should fire you," he said. "Opening that door was a direct violation. But you won't. You need the money. And honestly, we need someone who can handle weird situations without completely losing it." Rick looked at the monitors showing empty corridors. "Most people quit after the first night." "What about the mannequin?" Clyde was pointing right at that door. "Sometimes the building tries to help. Sometimes it tries to hurt you. Learning the difference is part of staying alive." I thought about the little girl with her crayon drawing, Patrick's warnings about things moving around at night. The rules aren't random, are they? They're actual protection. "Now you're getting it." Rick stood up. "Follow them exactly, Betty. All of them. The previous guard thought he was smart enough to bend them. He thought he could figure out what was really going on here." "What happened to him?" "He found out." Rick walked toward the door, then stopped. "You've got 4 hours left in your shift. Stick to your patrols, greet the mannequin, avoid the storage door. Pretend tonight never happened." "Rick, wait." I grabbed the rule sheet from my pocket. "The thing about avoiding people in top hats. You said that was the most important rule." His face went white. "Did you see someone in a top hat?" "No. But the way you talked about it. If you see someone in a top hat, you run. You don't ask questions. You don't try to help them. You don't engage at all. You go the other direction as fast as you can. Why? What happens if nothing good?" Rick's hand was already on the door handle. "That's the one rule you can't break, Betty. Not even once." He left me alone with the monitors and my racing thoughts. I stared at the screens showing empty corridors and dark storefronts, trying to process everything I'd learned. The previous security guard was missing. The body in the storage room was some kind of supernatural warning. The mannequin was either helping me or leading me into danger. And somewhere in this building, there was something wearing a top hat that scared Rick more than decomposing corpses. I looked at the time, 12:47 a.m., 5 hours until sunrise. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out for my next patrol, the rules clutched in my sweaty palm. This time I was going to follow every single one, even if I didn't understand why. I barely survived my first shift, but I wasn't about to let that stop me from coming back. $30 an hour was $30 an hour, and my eviction notice wasn't going to pay itself. I showed up at 9:50 p.m., 10 minutes early because I wanted to catch Rick before he took off. I found him by the information desk, looking just as beat as the night before. "You came back," he said, like he was genuinely surprised. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Most people don't, after the first night." Rick handed me the radio and security office keys. "How are you feeling about the rules?" "I'm going to follow every single one." "Good. That's what I want to hear." He started walking toward the exit, then stopped. "Betty, the thing about the top hat, if you see someone wearing one, don't try to be brave. Just run." "What exactly am I running from?" But Rick was already pushing through the doors, his car keys jingling as he hurried across the parking lot like something was chasing him. I walked to the security office and settled into the creaky chair, watching the monitors show empty corridors and dark storefronts. Everything looked normal, boring even. Maybe tonight would be different. At 11 p.m. sharp, I grabbed my flashlight and headed out for my first patrol. The mall felt known now, less intimidating than it had 24 hours ago. I knew where the squeaky tiles were, which security gates rattled when the air conditioning kicked on, how my footsteps bounced differently in each section. I found Clyde in the men's department, standing exactly where he was supposed to be in the window display. His charcoal suit looked perfect under the security lights. "Hi, Clyde," I said, putting actual warmth in my voice this time. "How's your night going?" His glass eyes caught the light, almost like he was looking right back at me. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling less ridiculous than I'd expected. If greeting a mannequin was the weirdest thing that happened tonight, I could handle that. The rest of my patrol went without a hitch. All doors locked, all security gates in place, no signs of break-ins or trouble. I checked the staff-only door near the food court storage area and kept moving without slowing down. Whatever was behind that door could stay there. Back in the security office, I made myself coffee from the machine that only worked half the time and watched the monitors. Empty hallways, dark storefronts, nothing stirring anywhere in the building. At midnight, I left for my second patrol. Walking past the food court, I caught the usual sound of shifting fabric and spotted Patrick's blankets piled by the fountain. "Hey," I called softly. "It's just me." Patrick sat up, squinting in my flashlight beam. He looked more alert tonight, less like someone who'd been living on the streets. "You came back," he said. "Yeah, well, I need the money. Most people don't come back after the first night. So I keep hearing." I sat down at one of the food court tables. "Patrick, last night you said this place gets strange. What did you mean exactly?" Patrick pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and glanced across the empty food court. "You see things, hear things. People who shouldn't be here." "What kind of people?" "The kind you don't want to meet." Patrick's voice dropped lower. "There's this man who shows up sometimes. Fancy clothes, old-fashioned hat. When I see him, I hide until he's gone." My stomach twisted. "A top hat? You know about him?" "Rick warned me. Said if I saw someone in a top hat, I should run." Patrick nodded grimly. "Smart advice. That one's different from the others. More dangerous." "Others?" "The little girl's harmless. Sad, but harmless. The mannequin moves around, but he's trying to help, I think. But the man in the hat, Patrick shuddered. He talks to you, knows things about you he shouldn't know, tries to convince you to do things. What kind of things? Bad things. Permanent things. Patrick met my eyes. He showed up the night before you started, asked me about the new security guard, wanted to know what kind of person you were. I didn't tell him anything. I felt cold even in the mall's stuffy air. He knows about me. He knows about everyone who works here. Past, present, future. Patrick stood up and started gathering his blankets. I'm going to find somewhere else to sleep tonight. You should stick close to the security office. Patrick, wait. Why do you stay here if it's so dangerous? He paused, his blankets bundled in his arms. Same reason you do. Don't have anywhere else to go. Patrick vanished into the darkness between storefronts, leaving me alone in the food court. I grabbed my flashlight and walked back toward the security office, his warnings repeating in my head. At 1 a.m., I made myself do another patrol. The rules said hourly rounds, and I was going to follow the rules exactly. I moved through the main corridor, checking doors and testing locks, trying not to think about men in top hats who knew things they shouldn't know. I was heading back from the department store when I saw him. A tall figure standing perfectly still near the jewelry store, about 50 feet away. Even in the dim security lighting, I could see the old-fashioned black suit and the unmistakable outline of a top hat. My blood turned to ice water. The man's face was pale and thin, with dark eyes that seemed to be looking directly at me despite the distance. He stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back, like he was waiting for something, or someone. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. Rick's voice repeated in my head, "If you see someone in a top hat, you run." But as I took another step backward, the figure began walking toward me. His footsteps rang out way too loud in the empty corridor, each one bouncing off the tile walls like gunshots. I ran. I sprinted toward the security office, my sneakers squeaking against the floor as I rounded corners and dodged between storefronts. Behind me, those steady footsteps continued, never speeding up, but somehow keeping pace. I ducked into the service hallway that ran behind the food court, thinking I could circle around and reach the office from the other direction. But when I came out near the department store, he was already there, standing between me and where I needed to go. How had he gotten there so fast? "Miss Aguilar," he said, his voice low and refined, with an accent I couldn't place. "There's no need to run." I backed away, panic flooding my chest. He knew my name. "I understand you've been having difficulties," he continued, taking a step closer. "Financial troubles, personal struggles, the recent unpleasantness at the hospital." My mouth went dry. Nobody knew about the hospital except my family and the doctors. I'd never told Rick or Jonathan about the pills, the emergency room, the psychiatric hold. "How do you know about that?" "I know many things about you, Betty. Your student loans, your eviction notice, the way you felt when you swallowed those pills, hoping everything would just stop hurting." I stumbled backward, hitting the wall behind me. "Stay away from me. I'm here to help." He smiled, and his teeth were too white, too sharp. "You're in pain. You've been in pain for so long. I can make it stop. I don't want your help." "Of course you do. That's why you took those pills. That's why you're working in this terrible place for terrible people who don't care if you live or die." He took another step closer. "I can arrange an accident, something quick and painless. No one would blame you. No one would even be surprised." I pressed myself against the wall, trying to get as far away from him as possible. "You're insane." "I'm practical. You're going to die anyway, Betty. If not tonight, then next week or next month. This job will kill you eventually. Everyone who works here dies or disappears. I'm simply offering you a choice in how it happens. No. Think about it. Your sister won't have to worry about you anymore. Your parents won't have to watch you struggle. You won't have to face another eviction notice or another rejection letter or another night in this horrible place." He was close enough now that I could see his eyes weren't quite human, too dark, too deep, like looking into empty wells. "All you have to do is say yes." I ran again, this time toward the food court. Maybe Patrick was still around. Maybe he could help, or at least witness what was happening to me. But the man in the top hat was faster than he looked. He showed up around every corner before I could reach it, always blocking my way, always wearing that awful grin. "You can't run forever, Betty. This building has rules, and one of them is that everyone pays a price eventually." I burst into the food court, gasping for breath. Patrick, are you here?" The man in the top hat stepped into the food court behind me, his footsteps bouncing off the tile walls. "Your homeless friend can't help you. No one can help you. This is between you and me." "Betty!" Patrick's voice came from somewhere near the fountain. "Toy store. Now!" I saw him step out from behind a pillar, his blankets gripped tight in his hands. He looked scared but set on whatever he was planning. "Run!" he shouted. "Toy store. Grab the brown teddy bear. Hold it tight." The man in the top hat turned toward Patrick, his smile disappearing. "This doesn't concern you, old man." "Like hell it doesn't." Patrick stepped forward, putting himself between me and the thing in the top hat. "Betty, go. Now." I sprinted toward the toy store while Patrick began yelling at the top of his lungs, making as much noise as he could. He was smashing something metal against the fountain, creating a racket that bounced through the entire mall. Hey, you fancy bastard! You want someone? Come get me! I'm right here!" I rushed into the toy store and searched the shelves desperately, hunting for a brown teddy bear. My hands trembled as I shoved aside dolls, action figures, and board games. There, on the bottom shelf, squeezed between a toy truck and a puzzle box, a beat-up brown teddy bear with button eyes and a red ribbon around its neck. The second I picked it up, it felt warm, as if it had been sitting in sunshine. I snatched the bear and ducked behind a display of kids' bikes, clutching it to my chest like Patrick had told me to. Outside the store, I could hear him still yelling, still creating a distraction. Then Patrick screamed. It was a sound I'd never heard anyone make before. Pure terror and pain mixed together. The scream stopped suddenly, leaving a silence so complete it made my ears ring. I stayed hidden behind those bicycles for over an hour, holding the teddy bear and listening to the terrible quiet that had taken over the mall. The bear felt warm against me, and somehow that heat made me feel safer, like it was shielding me from something I couldn't see. When I finally crept out of the toy store, the food court was empty. Patrick's blankets were scattered around the fountain, like he'd just vanished mid-sentence. No sign of the man in the top hat. No sign of Patrick. I pulled out my radio with shaking hands. Rick, are you there?" Static, then his tired voice. "Betty? What's wrong?" "Patrick's gone. The man in the top hat was here, and Patrick saved me, and now he's gone." A long pause. Then Rick let out a breath, the sound crackling through the radio speaker. "You made it through," he said. "That's what matters." "What about Patrick?" "Patrick knew what could happen if he stayed in the mall. He chose to help you anyway." "The teddy bear. How did he know about the teddy bear?" "We've got protective items planted around the building. Things that can help if you know where to find them. Rick's voice was getting fainter, like he was moving away from his radio. Take the rest of the night off, Betty. Go home. Process what happened. Rick, I can't keep doing this. People are disappearing. People are dying. People are paying their rent, including you. The radio crackled. Be here tomorrow night, same time. The thing in the top hat won't come back for a while. They don't like to fail. The radio went silent, leaving me alone in the empty food court with a teddy bear and the sound of Patrick's scream still bouncing around in my head. I walked back to the security office, grabbed my stuff, and headed out to the parking lot. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the building and trying to make sense of what I'd just gotten myself into. Patrick was gone. The previous security guard had vanished, and I was still planning to come back tomorrow night because $30 an hour was $30 an hour. I drove home gripping the stuffed bear, wondering how many more people would vanish before I figured out what was really going on in that place. Or before I vanished myself. I clutched the teddy bear against my chest, feeling its strange warmth seep through my security uniform. Outside the toy store, Patrick was still shouting, his voice bouncing off the food court walls as he banged something metal against the fountain. Come on, you fancy piece of shit. You want someone? I'm right here. The bear's button eyes stared up at me from where I crouched behind the bicycle display. Its fur was worn smooth in places, like a kid had loved it for years before it ended up on this shelf. The red ribbon around its neck looked faded but carefully tied. Patrick's voice got louder, more desperate. That's right. Look at me. Forget about her. I pressed my face against the bear's soft head and tried to make myself smaller behind the bikes. The warmth spread through my arms, my chest, like sitting next to a fireplace on a cold day. Whatever this thing was, it felt safe in a way nothing else in this mall did. The yelling stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, I could still hear Patrick moving around out there, his footsteps on the tile, the scrape of something being dragged. Then his voice again, but different now. Quieter. No. No, please. I didn't tell her anything important. She doesn't know. Patrick screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the noise someone makes when something inside them breaks completely, when pain goes beyond what a person can handle. The scream sliced through the empty mall like a blade, echoing off every surface until it felt like the building itself was crying out. Then nothing. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. It pressed down on me, making my ears ring and my chest tight. I held the teddy bear closer and counted my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Nothing moved in the food court. No footsteps, no voices, no metal scraping against concrete. I stayed behind those bicycles for over an hour, listening to that terrible quiet and feeling the bear's warmth keep me steady. Every few minutes I'd hear the building settle or the air conditioning kick on, and I'd freeze up thinking something was coming for me. But the bear stayed warm, and somehow that made me feel safe. When I finally worked up the courage to leave the toy store, I crept out like I was walking through a minefield. The food court looked exactly the same as always, except for Patrick's blankets scattered around the fountain like someone had thrown them in every direction. His coffee cup sat on one of the tables, still half full. No sign of Patrick, no sign of the man in the top hat. I pulled out my radio with trembling hands. Rick, are you there? Static crackled for a few seconds before his voice came through, tired and flat. Betty? What's going on? Patrick's gone. The man in the top hat was here, and Patrick saved me, and now he's gone. A long pause. I could hear Rick breathing on the other end, probably figuring out what to say. You made it through, he said finally. That's what matters. What about Patrick? Patrick knew what could happen if he stayed in the mall. He chose to help you anyway. I stared at the scattered blankets, the forgotten coffee cup. The teddy bear. How did he know about the teddy bear? We've got protective items planted around the building, things that can help if you know where to find them. Rick's voice was getting fainter, like he was walking away from his radio. Take the rest of the night off, Betty. Go home. Process what happened. Rick, I can't keep doing this. People are disappearing. People are dying. People are paying their rent, including you. The radio crackled with static. Be here tomorrow night. Same time. The thing in the top hat won't come back for a while. They don't like to fail. The radio went dead. I stood there in the empty food court, holding a teddy bear and listening to Patrick's scream still bouncing around inside my head. I walked back to the security office and grabbed my keys, my phone, the rule sheet. The monitors showed empty hallways and dark storefronts. Everything back to normal, like nothing had happened. Like Patrick had never been there at all. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the mall's dark windows and trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. The teddy bear sat in my passenger seat, still warm, still somehow reassuring, even though it represented everything wrong with this place. Patrick was gone. The previous security guard had vanished, and I was going to come back tomorrow night anyway, because $30 an hour was still $30 an hour. I started the engine and drove home, the bear's button eyes staring at me from the passenger seat. In my rearview mirror, the mall looked like any other abandoned shopping center. But I knew better now. I knew what was lurking in there. I grabbed the teddy bear from where I'd left it on the desk and clutched it against my chest, feeling that same strange warmth spread through my arms. The footsteps outside the security office were soft but deliberate, like a kid trying to sneak past their parents' bedroom. And underneath that sound, something heavier being dragged across the tile, a scraping noise that made my teeth ache. I stared at the monitor showing the hallway outside my door. Empty corridor, flickering fluorescent lights, nothing moving. But I could hear them out there, clear as anything. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I held my breath and watched the monitor. Still nothing. Just an empty hallway that looked exactly like it should at 3 in the morning. But the quiet felt wrong, like the building was waiting for something. A soft knock on the door made me jump so hard I nearly dropped the bear. 3 gentle taps, the kind a polite child would make when asking permission to enter. I stared at the door handle, waiting for it to turn, but it stayed perfectly still. Another knock. 3 taps again, patient and careful. "I know you're in there," came the little girl's voice, muffled by the door but clear enough to understand. "I have something to show you." I squeezed the teddy bear closer and stayed quiet. The rules told me to ignore weird noises and voices. The rules had kept me breathing for 3 nights straight. "It's about Patrick," she said, "and the others." My stomach twisted. I looked at the monitor again, still showing an empty hallway. Whatever was standing outside my door didn't show up on cameras. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," I whispered. "The rules are to keep you safe from the bad things. I'm not a bad thing." Her voice was closer now, like she was sitting right against the door. "I'm trying to help." The scraping sound picked up again, moving away from the office. I watched the monitors as Clyde showed up on the main corridor camera, walking with that stiff, weird movement toward the center court. His head turned to look straight at the camera as he passed, those glass eyes catching the security lighting. "He wants to show you something too," the girl said. "We both do." I got to my feet slowly, the bear still in my hands. "Show me what?" where they went. Patrick and the others. They're not really gone, you know. They're just somewhere else. The footsteps moved away from the door, heading down the hallway toward the main corridor. I watched the monitors, but couldn't spot her anywhere. Just Clyde standing perfectly still in the center court, positioned near the children's play area like he was waiting for something. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, then stopped with my hand on the door handle. Every instinct I'd developed over the past 3 nights was yelling at me to stay put. Lock the door. Wait until sunrise. Follow the rules that had kept me alive. But Patrick was dead because he'd saved my life. The previous security guard was missing, and I was sick of being scared of everything in this place. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, just like the monitors showed, but I could smell something that hadn't been there before. Chalk dust and crayons, like an elementary school classroom. I followed the scent toward the main corridor, my flashlight beam sweeping back and forth across the tile floor. Near the fountain where Patrick had made his last stand, I found another drawing. This one was different from the others, more detailed, more careful. It showed the same house with the large tree, but now I could see figures standing in the windows. A man with long gray hair, a young guy in a security uniform, other faces I didn't recognize, all looking out from inside the house like they were trapped there. At the bottom of the drawing, written in careful crayon letters, "They're waiting for you." I looked up from the paper and saw Clyde standing about 20 feet away, completely still near the play area. His glass eyes caught my flashlight beam, and for just a second I could swear he nodded. "You found it." The girl's voice came from somewhere behind me. I spun around, but she wasn't there, just empty storefronts and darkness. "The house is real," she continued, her voice echoing off the walls like she was speaking from inside the building itself. "It's where everyone goes when they can't stay here anymore." "Where are you?" I called out, my voice bouncing around the empty mall. "I'm everywhere and nowhere. It's complicated." A giggle that sounded like wind chimes. "But I can show you how to find the house, if you want to see Patrick again." I stared at the drawing in my hands, at those faces pressed against the windows. "Is he okay?" "He's safe. Safer than he was here. But he misses you." The scraping sound started again, and I watched Clyde begin moving toward the department store. His movements were smoother now, less like a mannequin being dragged and more like someone walking with purpose. "Follow him," the girl said, "but bring the bear. You'll need it where we're going." I held the teddy bear closer and started following Clyde, my shoes making soft sounds on the tile floor. Behind me, I could hear the girl's steps too, light and quick, staying with us but just out of view. We made our way through the department store, past racks of marked-down clothes and sale displays. Clyde walked with that same careful pace, never turning around, but somehow knowing I was behind him. He took me toward the back of the store, past the men's section where I'd first met him, into parts I'd never really checked during my usual rounds. "Almost there," the girl whispered, her voice coming from somewhere among the clothing racks. Clyde stopped in front of what looked like a solid wall covered with mirrors, the kind department stores use to make spaces look bigger. But as I got closer, I could see that one of the mirror panels was slightly different from the others. The reflection was wrong. Instead of showing me and Clyde, it showed the house from the drawings, complete with the large tree and figures in the windows. "Touch the mirror," the girl said, "right in the center." I reached out with my free hand, the teddy bear still warm against my chest. The moment my fingers touched the glass, it rippled like water. The surface turned liquid, showing not my reflection, but a doorway leading into the house I'd seen drawn so many times. Through the opening, I could see Patrick sitting in a rocking chair on a front porch, looking exactly like he had in the mall, but somehow more solid, more real. He saw me and smiled, raising one hand in a small wave. "Betty," he called out, his voice clear and strong. "You found us." Behind him, I could see other people moving around inside the house, the young security guard Rick had talked about. A few others I didn't know, all wearing that same calm look Patrick had on his face. "It's not what you think," the girl said, and now I could see her reflection in the mirror too, standing right beside me even though she wasn't actually there. "It's not death. It's just somewhere else. Somewhere the bad things can't reach." I looked at Clyde, who had turned to face me directly. His glass eyes seemed more alive than they ever had before. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you have a choice to make," the girl said. "You can keep working here, following the rules, watching more people disappear, or you can understand what this place really is." "What is it?" "A doorway. The mall, the entities, all of it. It's a way station between worlds. Some people get pulled through against their will. Others choose to go." The girl's reflection smiled sadly. "I chose to stay in between, to help people decide." I stared at Patrick through the liquid mirror. He looked happy, or at least content. More relaxed than I'd ever seen him during our short time together. "If I go through, can I come back?" "I don't know," the girl said honestly. "No one's ever tried." The mirror started to turn solid again, the image of the house growing dim. Patrick pressed his hand against what had to be a window on his side, and I put mine against the glass on mine. For just a moment, it felt like we were actually touching. Then the mirror went back to normal, showing only my reflection, and Clyde standing still beside me. "Think about it," the girl's voice whispered, already fading. "But don't think too long. The man in the top hat will come back eventually, and next time, there won't be anyone to save you." I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection and holding the teddy bear. Clyde had returned to his mannequin stillness, but I could swear his expression looked different now. Less blank, more knowing. I walked back to the security office with the new drawing clutched in my hand, my mind racing with everything I'd seen. The monitors showed empty corridors and dark storefronts, everything back to how it was before. But nothing about this place would ever feel right again. I had 4 hours until sunrise, 4 hours to figure out what to do with everything I'd learned. Patrick was alive somewhere else. The mall was some kind of supernatural way station, and I had a choice to make: stay and keep following the rules, watching people vanish one by one, or step through a mirror into a house where the missing people waited, not knowing if I'd ever be able to come back. I placed the teddy bear on the desk and stared at the drawing of faces in windows, wondering which choice would come back to haunt me more. I stayed in my chair, gripping the teddy bear and watching the monitors as the footsteps moved away from my door. On camera 3, the little girl appeared in the main corridor, walking hand in hand with Clyde, like she was taking her favorite toy for a stroll. The sight should have been beyond belief. Clyde was a mannequin, plastic and metal, and glass eyes that couldn't see anything. But he walked beside her with smooth, natural steps, his head turning when she pointed at things along their path. They were heading toward the children's play area near the center court. The girl stopped every few feet, pointing at specific spots while Clyde's head turned to follow her directions. His movements looked disturbingly human now, like whatever force controlled him was getting stronger. The rules said to ignore weird sounds, movements, and voices. The rules had kept me alive for 3 nights, while other people vanished. But watching this felt different, then hiding from the man in the top hat. The girl had tried to help me before, leaving drawings that looked like warnings or messages. On monitor 5, they reached the toy store where I'd hidden with the teddy bear. The girl pointed excitedly at the entrance while Clyde turned to face the store directly, his glass eyes catching the security lighting. Then she did something that made my stomach drop. She pulled a piece of paper out of thin air, holding it up toward the security camera like she knew I was watching. Even through the grainy black and white feed, I could tell it was another drawing. This one showed the mall's layout in careful detail, with certain spots marked in bright red crayon: the security office, the toy store, the food court where Patrick had made his last stand, and something else, a path drawn in yellow that connected all the red marks, leading from where I sat through the main corridor to where the girl and Clyde now stood. She wanted me to follow them. I set the teddy bear on the desk and grabbed my flashlight, clipping the radio to my belt with trembling fingers. Every survival instinct I'd picked up over the past 3 nights told me to stay put, lock the door, wait until sunrise, stick to the rules that had kept me alive. But Patrick was gone, because he'd saved my life. The previous security guard was missing, and I was sick of sitting in this office watching other people vanish while I cowered behind rules I didn't even understand. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The chalk and crayon smell was stronger now, mixed with something else, the faint scent of old fabric and dust, like clothes that had been stored in an attic for years. I followed it toward the main corridor, my flashlight beam sweeping across the tile floor. On the monitors, I'd seen them heading toward the play area, but when I reached the center court, they were gone. I stood next to the fountain where Patrick's blankets had been scattered, listening to the building's familiar sounds: air conditioning buzzing, fluorescent lights crackling, the distant rumble of traffic from the highway. Then I heard it, the girl's footsteps, light and quick, coming from the direction of the department store. I followed the sound past darkened storefronts and security gates, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The footsteps stayed just ahead of me, always around the next corner or behind the next display. Near the men's clothing section, where I'd first met Clyde, I found another drawing on the floor. This one showed the same house with the large tree, but now there were more figures in the windows. I recognized Patrick's long gray hair, the young security guard's uniform. Other faces I didn't know, all looking out from inside the house like they were waiting for something. At the bottom, written in careful crayon letters, "They want to come home." I looked up from the paper and saw them, the girl and Clyde, standing about 30 feet away near a section of the store I'd never really checked during my rounds. The girl waved at me with one small hand while Clyde's head turned toward me with that weird, too smooth movement. "You came?" the girl said, her voice carrying clearly across the empty store. "I wasn't sure you would." I walked toward them slowly, the drawing gripped in my free hand. "What do you want to show me?" "The truth about this place, about why people like you keep getting hired." She gestured toward a wall lined with mirrors, the kind department stores use to make spaces look bigger. "About what really happened to Patrick and the others." Clyde walked over to one of the mirrors, his image appearing clearly in the glass, but the girl showed no reflection whatsoever. "Touch the mirror," she said, right where Clyde is standing. I reached out with my free hand, my fingers touching the cold glass. The moment I made contact, the surface rippled like water, and the reflection shifted. Instead of showing me and Clyde, the mirror displayed the house from the drawings. But this version was more detailed, more real. I could see Patrick sitting on the front porch, looking exactly like he had in the mall, but somehow more solid. He saw me and smiled, raising one hand in a small wave. "Betty." His voice came through the glass, clear and strong. "You found us." Behind him, other people moved around inside the house. The young security guard Rick had mentioned. Folks I didn't recognize, all wearing the same calm expression Patrick had. "They're not dead," the girl said softly. "They're just somewhere else. Somewhere safe." I stared at Patrick through the liquid mirror, my pulse racing. How is this possible? The mall is a doorway. The entities, the rules, all of it exists to sort people. Some get taken by the bad things. Others find their way to safety. The girl's voice was sad but gentle. I help people choose. The mirror started to turn solid again, Patrick's image getting weaker. He put his hand against what had to be a window on his side, and I put mine against the glass. For just a moment, it felt like we were actually touching. Then the mirror went back to normal, showing only my reflection and Clyde standing still beside me. "Think about it," the girl whispered, her voice already fading. "But don't think too long. The man in the top hat will come back eventually, and next time, there won't be anyone to save you." I stood there staring at my reflection, holding the drawing and trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Clyde had gone back to his mannequin stillness, but something in his glass eyes seemed different now. Less empty, more aware. I walked back to the security office with my thoughts spinning, the new drawing pressed tight against my chest. The monitors displayed empty hallways and dark storefronts, everything appearing normal again. But I realized now that normal was just another word for hiding from the truth. I had 3 hours until sunrise. 3 hours to figure out what to do with everything I'd learned. Patrick was alive somewhere else. This place was some kind of supernatural sorting system, and I had a choice to make: keep following the rules and watching people vanish, or find out what was on the other side of that mirror. I placed the drawing on the desk next to the teddy bear and stared at the faces in the windows, wondering which choice would hurt me more. I followed the sound through the department store, weaving between clothing racks and clearance displays towards sections I'd never bothered exploring during my regular patrols. The girl's footsteps stayed just ahead, always around the next corner or behind the next fixture. My radio crackled softly on my belt, the small screen showing security feeds as I moved. I caught glimpses of them on camera, the girl's white dress flashing past monitor 3, Clyde's stiff body appearing on monitor 7 near the back wall of the store. They were leading me somewhere specific. I reached the back section where employee break rooms and storage areas sat clustered behind the main shopping floor. The footsteps stopped. I swept my flashlight across the wall, searching for any sign of where they'd gone. The beam caught something strange, a section of wood paneling that didn't quite match the rest. The grain ran in a different direction, and there was a small gap along one edge that looked deliberate. I pressed my hand against the panel and felt it give slightly. When I pushed harder, it swung inward on hidden hinges, showing a narrow opening behind the false wall. Cool air drifted up from below, carrying the scent of concrete and old paper. A staircase led down into darkness, the steps worn smooth like they'd been used for years. The girl appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her white dress glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked up at me and smiled, not the innocent expression of a child, but something older and more knowing. "Come down," she called softly. "I want to show you something important." Clyde's head appeared beside her, turning with that weird smoothness to face me directly. His glass eyes caught my flashlight beam as he started moving further down into the underground space. I stood at the top of the hidden staircase, my hand holding tight to the doorframe. Every rule I'd memorized told me to turn around, go back to the security office, wait for sunrise, pretend I'd never found this place. But Patrick was gone. because he'd tried to protect me. The previous security guard had vanished after asking too many questions, and I was tired of following rules that kept me in the dark while other people paid the price. I went down the stairs. The underground space was bigger than I'd expected, with concrete walls and fluorescent lights that blinked on automatically as I went down. The air smelled like a basement, damp and stale, with hints of something chemical I couldn't place. The staircase opened into a tunnel that stretched in both directions, vanishing into darkness beyond my flashlight's beam. The walls were covered with drawings, dozens of them, all showing the same house with the large tree. But these weren't crayon sketches like the ones I'd found upstairs. These were detailed, careful illustrations that looked like blueprints. Between the drawings, photographs were taped to the concrete. Missing person flyers, security guard ID badges, pictures of people I didn't recognize, all wearing expressions of confusion or fear. I found Patrick's face among them. Not a recent photo, but one that looked like it had been taken years ago when he still had a home and a job. Below it, someone had written, "Recruited November 15th," in neat handwriting. Next to Patrick's photo was another security guard, younger than me with nervous eyes and a forced smile. His name tag read, Marcus. Below his picture, recruited October 28th, disappeared November 12th. The previous guard Rick had talked about, the one who'd broken the rules and looked into things he should have left alone. I kept walking, my footsteps bouncing off the tunnel walls. More photos, more dates. The pattern went back months, maybe years. Security guards hired and vanished. Homeless people who'd looked for shelter in the mall. Even a few maintenance workers and cleaning staff. All of them recruited. All of them gone. The tunnel bent right, and I spotted light up ahead. Not those harsh fluorescent strips running along the walls, but something gentler and warmer. I walked toward what appeared to be a bigger room. The girl sat there waiting for me, legs crossed on the concrete floor next to Clyde, who stood completely still against the far wall. But what covered that wall made me stop breathing. Monitors. Dozens of them, displaying every corner of the mall in sharp, vivid detail. Not the grainy black and white feeds from the security office, but high-definition color images that caught things the regular cameras missed. I could see myself on one of the screens, standing in the tunnel with my mouth hanging open. But I could also see other things. Shadows moving through the hallways upstairs, figures that didn't show up on the regular security system. "You've been watching me," I said. The girl nodded. "We watch everyone who works here, from the moment they're hired until..." She waved her hand toward the wall of missing person photos. "Until they disappear." "Until they choose," she corrected. "Everyone gets to choose. Eventually." I looked at Clyde, who stayed perfectly still but somehow felt more real than he ever had upstairs. "What kind of choice?" "The same one Patrick made. The same one Marcus made before him." The girl stood up, smoothing down her white dress. "Stay and follow the rules until something worse than the man in the top hat finds you. Or step through the mirror and join the others in the safe place." "What about a third option? What about leaving, quitting the job and walking away?" The girl's expression grew sad. "Look at monitor 12. I found the screen she meant. It showed the mall's parking lot, but not as it was now. This was daytime footage, and I could see a young man in a security uniform walking toward a beat-up Honda Civic. He looked relieved, like someone who'd just gotten away from something awful. "Marcus," the girl said. 3 days after he found this room, he decided to quit and drive away. The footage kept rolling. Marcus climbed into his car and turned the key. He backed out of his spot and drove toward the exit. Then the car just quit moving. Not like it had broken down or run out of fuel. It simply froze in place, as if someone had hit pause on the whole world. Marcus stepped out and glanced around, looking confused, even through the blurry video. He walked back toward the mall, his steps getting stiffer as he went. By the time he reached the doors, he moved exactly like Clyde had, rigid and awkward, like a puppet on strings. "He came back inside," the girl said quietly. "And we never saw him again, not even in the safe place." I stared at the monitors, at the wall of missing people, at the girl who looked 8 years old, but spoke like someone who'd seen way too much. "How long have you been down here?" "Time works differently when you're between places. Sometimes it feels like days, sometimes like years." She walked over to one of the drawings on the wall, tracing the outline of the house with her finger. "I used to live there, you know, in the house, before I decided to stay and help." "Help with what?" "Making sure people understand their choices, making sure they know what they're really choosing between." She turned back to me, her dark eyes reflecting the monitor light. "The man in the top hat doesn't give people choices. He just takes them. But there are other ways to leave this place." I thought about Patrick's calm face in the mirror, about the way he'd waved at me like he was really glad to see me. Is he really safe? Patrick? Safer than he ever was here. Safer than you are now. The girl walked back to where Clyde stood against the wall. "But you can't stay down here much longer. They'll notice you're missing from your patrol route." I checked my watch. Nearly 4 a.m. I'd been away from the security office for more than an hour. What happens if I go back upstairs and pretend I never found this place? You keep working, keep following the rules, keep watching people disappear until something decides you've learned too much. The girl's voice was matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. Or until you break down and make a mistake that lets the bad things catch you. And if I choose the mirror? You join Patrick and the others. You're safe, but you can never come back to this world. I stared at the screens displaying the deserted mall above us, at the photos of everyone who'd confronted this exact decision. Some had picked the mirror. Others had attempted to escape and been claimed by something far worse. There's no way to just stop this? To shut down whatever's happening here? The girl and Clyde both turned to look at me, and for a moment I could swear the mannequin's face looked different. "No one's ever asked that question before," the girl said slowly. "What do you mean?" "Everyone who finds this room asks about their own choices. How to save themselves. How to escape." She tilted her head, studying me with those two bright eyes. "You're the first person to ask about stopping it entirely." I felt something change in the air around us, like the building itself was eavesdropping on what we were saying. Could it be stopped? The girl stayed silent for a long moment, her eyes shifting between me and the wall of monitors. "I don't know," she said finally. "But maybe that's a fourth choice.